Today on No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Cramer.
I'm encouraging you to learn from the scriptures collectively together so that if we get into seasons where we're stubborn, that we might be able to recognize, wait a minute, here's the characteristics of God's chastening hand because he loves me and he desires to show mercy to me. Maybe I need to pay attention because he's trying to get my attention. When the situations just don't add up in your life, there's a confusion of mind. Understand it this way. Again, Old Testament, very pointed, sharp language. I'm going to appoint terror over you. Literally, confusion. You're just baffled of like, how in the world? How did that just happen to me?
Through innocent blood, he showed his love, taking the cross. No greater love than innocent blood.
Welcome back to No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Cramer. Life can feel confusing. Things fall apart, doors close, peace disappears. But what if that disruption is actually God trying to get your attention? In Exodus 8, God uses escalating circumstances to confront Pharaoh's stubbornness. And Pastor Jeff reminds us that sometimes God lovingly uses discipline to draw us back. If you've been feeling unsettled, stuck, or like nothing's working, pray that God will help you see what he's really doing behind the scenes. Here's Pastor Jeff, and continuing in the message titled, I'm Trying to Get Your Attention.
But this time they failed, and the mosquitoes covered everyone, people and animals alike. Now watch, verse 19. And here's what they said. This is the finger of God. The magicians are saying, the magicians are saying this to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's heart remained hard. He would not listen to them, just as the Lord had predicted. And so here's another plague. We're up to the third plague here. And even his magicians, even the guys that have duplicated some of these other mysterious, miraculous plagues that are going on, they couldn't do it. And they're saying straight up, wait a minute, Pharaoh, this is the hand of God. This is the hand of Lord Almighty. Now we spring ahead, chapter 8, verse 21. Now we get down to verse 21 and we're at the fourth plague. What did I say, 21? Well, let me start at 20. It says, then the Lord told Moses, he says, get up early in the morning and stand in Pharaoh's way as he goes down to the river and say to him, this is what the Lord says, let my people go so they can worship me. If you refuse, then I will send swarms of flies on you. Your officials, your people, and all the houses, the Egyptian homes will be filled with flies, and the ground will be covered with them. But this time, I will spare the region of Goshen, where my people live. No flies will be found there. And then you will know that I am the Lord, that I am present even in the heart of your land. And I will make a clear distinction between my people and your people. This miraculous sign will happen tomorrow. And God did it. And just notate there that listen, that God was present. He set his people apart. Even though that they were there in the land, they were up north, just right there at the bottom of the Mediterranean, but up north in Egypt. And that's where Goshen is. And that's where God's people was. They stayed there and God preserved them in that place. Now, by a show of hands, have you ever heard, and show me your hand on this, have you ever heard of a horsefly? Raise your hand so I can see. Okay, most of you have. Next question, have you ever been bitten by a horsefly? Does it feel good? Not so good. How in the world can a stupid fly cause an irritation like that? Right? And then the stupid red welt that a horsefly leaves on that. Now, I don't know what kind of flies these are. These are Egyptian flies, I know that, okay? Because they're plaguey, fourth plague flies. That's all I know about this. And so these are the four plagues that we see here in Exodus chapter 8. Now, I want to do something because, well, that is exciting. It's super important to know about the mosquito and the frogs and the flies. That this is good. God's doing something. But I want you to understand that God is trying to get your attention as well. And in the process of God trying to get our attention, well, his desire is for mercy and grace and truth. We saw that in the ministry of Jesus. We saw as we started our service off that way. God wanted to get the heart of Pharaoh. Yeah, he wanted to get his attention for sure. He was doing something. But sometimes we can get in this place to where we disregard God trying to get our attention. And I need to be super sensitive with your heart and your mind right now, right this second. So as we move into this second part of tonight's study right here, it's very powerful for sure, but I want you to know that I'm not starting this second part of the study going like this. This is not what I'm doing, okay? I'm teaching you through the scripture, okay? And if I had a little 25-cent coin in my hand and I lost it. No, okay, it came down and lands in my hand. I still have a coin in my hand, yes? Yes. Okay, what's in your hand right now? What are you holding? What are you reading from? It's a Bible. Did you say a pen? You have a pen in your hand, okay. Don't be so pokey, okay. There's a Bible in your hand, okay. Is there two sides to that Bible? Yes. What are they? Let's think more theological in nature. Very literal. You must be an architect or something like that. You're very focused, okay? An Old Testament and a New Testament. But it's the same coin, yes, Bible. Okay, we're still, God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay, so he doesn't change, right? His character is the same. So as we utilize the scriptures, we come to the second idea here tonight, and that is perfect discipline. And I want us to consider some application here. Again, we're going to take the Old Testament, which flows right into the New Testament, and we're going to consider how God desires to get our attention. Now remember what I said. I need to be hyper delicate with your hearts and your minds. I am not standing up here saying, I'm not going like this with this message, okay? That's not what I'm doing. We're just learning the scriptures. We're doing this together. So I want you to do two things. You got two hands. There's an Old Testament, there's a New Testament. I want you to go to Leviticus chapter 26 with one hand, and I want you to go to Hebrews chapter 12 with the other. So we got two sides in which we're turning to. Leviticus 26, which is the Old Testament. If you'd like to spring ahead, I'm in verse 14. And addition to that, we are going, Hebrews chapter 12. In fact, I'm going to do the same thing with you. I should have my little strap in here. Here we go. Hebrews 12, and I'll be looking at verses 5 through 13, okay? So those are the locations we're going to be at. Now, again, we're looking at two sides of the same coin. We're still in the Bible, but we've got an Old Testament and we have a New Testament. And both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, God tries to get human attention to why? To help save. He wants to save life. He desires mercy. He wants us to show mercy rather than just go through some religious motions of offering sacrifices. He wants it to be reflective within our life. He wants it to stick. He wants his character to be present. But sometimes God has to get our attention in very powerful ways. And in Leviticus 26, there are 7 steps that are here that God says that he will take to break stubborn pride. Now, we know that Leviticus, again, it's one of the books that Moses wrote, and he's speaking very specifically to the Israelites, okay? But we still see the same character of God, if you will. And so notice what happens here. We pick up in verse number 14. He says, but if you do not obey me, now he's not talking to Pharaoh. He's talking to the Israelites now. He says, if you do not obey me, and you do not observe all these commandments, and if you despise my statutes, or if your soul abhors my judgments, so that you do not perform all my commandments, but break my covenant. Now remember what the struggle was. We've got the Israelites that God has delivered them out. At this stage, at Leviticus 26 stage, they're out from under Egypt, but they're still living in a place of, I don't know that God will, and I'm not sure of all the things that he'll do. They're in a place of stubbornness, of unbelief, of doubt, and they just keep taking laps around the desert in the middle of that rebellion against God, in the middle of their pride against God. And so Moses is speaking these things for God. Verse number 16, this is the first step of chastening. He says, I will do this to you. I will even appoint terror over you, wasting disease and fever, which shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. And I will set my face against you, and you shall be defeated by your enemies. And those who hate you shall reign over you, and you shall flee when no one is pursuing you. Now, if you can just understand this element of distress, these guys saw all the plagues that God did upon Egypt and upon Pharaoh. They saw all of this stuff. And God is just baffled in the sense, well, I'm going to get their attention. Here's how I'm going to do it. And in verse number 16, it's very interesting. He says, I will appoint terror over you. The literal Hebrew word means this. It means confusion of mind because you cannot control the external situation. And here's what I want you to understand. Here's what I want you to recognize. Again, I'm not doing this to you. That's not what I'm doing. I'm encouraging you to learn from the scriptures collectively together so that if we get into seasons where we're stubborn, that we might be able to recognize, wait a minute, here's the characteristics of God's chastening hand because he loves me and he desires to show mercy to me. Maybe I need to pay attention because he's trying to get my attention. When the situations just don't add up in your life, there's a confusion of mind. Understand it this way. Again, Old Testament, very pointed, sharp language. I'm going to appoint terror over you. Literally, confusion. You're just baffled of like, how in the world? How did that just happen to me? And for those of you, and I can raise my hand on this. I hate to tell you that, but it's true. I can raise my hand on that. I've been under the chastening hand of God more than once in my life, for sure. And when you're in those spots, you're just going, and it's like, I know the truth of God, but my heart and my feet are not following the truth of God. And I've been in that place for a while. So God's got to shake some things up. And he has a way of getting our attention. We're going to run out of time. I'll just tell you that right up front here. But I feel compelled to tell you a story of I'm telling you that I've been under this thing, the chastening hand of God before in my life. I don't want that just to roll out there. Yeah, sure, yeah, Pastor. No, I have. It's horrible. It's terrible. One night, this is late 1990s, early 2000, somewhere in this range. I'm selling real estate in San Diego at this point. I just come out of law enforcement and all that. That wasn't the right path for me because I was getting very mean, nasty, and just mean. That's the best word for it. And I wasn't living as a Christian. I wasn't following the Lord the way that I knew I should be following the Lord. So I stopped by one of my buddy's house in Mission Valley. This is in San Diego. And I zipped into his condo complex, and I didn't have no stupid pass on my car, okay? And I was driving a fancy car. I had a 5 Series. It was a white BMW. It was an M Series. It was awesome. Needless to say, I was super prideful. I run in the house. I pull off my tie, and run into his house. I don't remember. I had to drop something. Dude, I was in his house for less than 10 minutes. And I come back, and guess what? My little car is connected to a tow truck. So they were doing this sweep in this complex of getting cars out of there. So they took it. Now, I didn't raise a stink with them. I followed them in my buddy's car. So I said, come on, Gary, let's go. Let's follow him. So we're following him. And we get up to this impound lot, and we pull right in the front, and the truck goes in that's towing my car, and they drop it, and they park it. And I'm seeing through the fence that they left the keys on the dashboard of the car. Now, why do you guys think I'm going to do something weird here? And so I said, Gary, the next truck that comes in, I said, I'm going in. Cramer, you're crazy. What's wrong with you? I'm doing it. And I just had that, I just was wrong. And there's these, there's the cameras and the guard shack and this big moving gate and all this stuff. All this stuff is going on. I went in, and it was under the cover of darkness because at this time it's like 9:30 at nighttime. And so I bolt in there, and I go, I see where the car is, and I'm running. I still had an extra set of keys. Actually, I had the keys. They didn't have the keys. They put the paperwork with my name, my license plate, all of that. That's what was on the dash. It was the paperwork was on the dash. I had the keys. So I'm running. I'm trying to turn it, right? Because you can start your car that way. And it makes a stupid noise right in front of the guard shack. But all the windows are down. I jumped in, popped that baby in reverse, and I'm going backwards down the aisle. He's running and chasing me. Things are flying everywhere. I felt like Dukes of Hazzard all over again. And it was amazing. This is a true story. It gets worse, okay? So I'm flying through this lot backwards, and windows are down, dust is coming in and everything, and I slam on the brakes and whip the front end around. Well, we had these, whatever our cell phones were, Gary's on the phone saying, okay, there's another truck coming in, another truck coming in, hurry up, because the gate's open. I whipped this baby around. That guy don't know who I am. I took off, boom, right over the top of this thing, off the curb. People are chasing me now. You're not going to catch me once I'm in my car. Cleared the gates, gone. Okay, now that's a funny story, yeah? Kind of funny, It's a true story, 1,000% true. There's probably a lot of details I've forgotten in that story because it's not appropriate for church. But all that to say, It's a real story. I really did that. I was under that season of my life, the chastening hand of God. I was so emboldened to do that, and I had all the paperwork. They didn't know who I was or what my car was. They didn't know anything. It was gone. So it was the grace of God. Even being under the chastening hand of God, there's no ramifications that came to me. That night, my car alarm went off in the garage. I think they somehow tried to track me down. I don't know. I could be wrong with this. But nothing ever happened. It went and gone. Well, I was in a series of time where I was just not submitting to the Lord. And I just couldn't figure out, how is all this crazy stuff happening to me right now? Verse 16 in your Bible, Leviticus 26 and 16. You're never going to forget this now, okay? I will do this to you. I will appoint terror over you. Confusion of mind. You can't control your external situations, and you just trip out. Why is this happening? That's an example, okay? It's a very elongated example. But if we were to go on farther than that, in verse number 19, we can recognize that God even goes to this place because his aim is to break our stubborn pride. And we get down into verse 18 and 19, and he says, I will break the pride of your power. I will make your heavens like iron and your earth like bronze. If you could understand it, you could think about this as you continue to examine what's going on. He's making their work situation difficult. Psalm 66 and 18 says this, NLT on the screen puts it to us this way. The psalmist says, if I had not confessed the sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. There's things that separate us from the Lord. And we know that they're there within the heart, and God desires to deal with the stuff within the heart. And sometimes when we're in the middle of a situation when work is just not going where we think it should, and it just feels like, oh my gosh, why is this so hard? Well, maybe because we're under the chastening hand of God. What about verse 22? What does he do here? I better speed up because we only have a few minutes. So I'm gonna arc over these really fast. You can study them yourself. But in verse 22, we can move through the process here and understand that what God was sharing with them in this chastening process as he moved through different steps of this chastening thing with the Israelites, that he stripped them of their precious possessions. In verse 26, they run into a food problem. In verse number 30, we find that there's the destruction of idols. Isaiah 59, 1 and 2, from the New King James, it says this. It says, behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, nor his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated you from your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he will not hear. There are those things that we can get into, the stubbornness, the rebellion of our own hearts, even as Christians, where we're just not listening to the Lord, and these different chastening things, as we see with the Israelites in the Old Testament, God was walking through all of these things. Verse 33, we understand that they would be scattered from the area. I don't know if you've ever been in that place to where it's like, maybe you're just early on, or maybe you've lost a house or something like that. But the chastening hand of God, you're just moving and moving and moving. Well, God is deep in the chastening process, and he's trying to disrupt your flow so that you humble yourself before him and come back to him, not like Pharaoh did. Oh, okay, I'm going to allow this. And then his heart got hard. He changed his mind real quickly. In other words, God relieves the pressure, and then you're right back to the same old thing. No. And then the final one there, the seventh step that you would see in that chastening there, in verse 36, is that there's, God said he's going to demoralize them. In other words, there's a loss of confidence and hope. And so we are not Israel, not at all. But God does chasten us to break our stubborn pride. And that's the theme that you will see in this chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. Again, I understand, folks, that we're dealing with the Old Testament there. I understand that it's specifically spoken to the Israelites, but it's very fascinating the way that we are encouraged in the New Testament. In fact, just turn there for a moment. In the book of Hebrews 12, in Hebrews 12, it says that you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and he scourges every son whom he receives. Scourges. The idea is that this is training by affliction. Okay? He says, if you endure chastening, God deals with you as with a son. For what son is there in whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Idea, very simple, is that if you show up into a Christian church and you're making the proclamation that you are a Christian, but you don't see the chastening hand of God upon your life, and you're continuing to live in rebellion and opposition and against the ways of the Lord and all that, and you don't see the chastening hand, there's a scriptural point right here that you're probably not saved. And so again, this is not it's not doing this. I'm not doing this tonight. I'm merely just teaching you through the scriptures. We looked at frogs, mosquitoes, and flies. I didn't think you were going to be super pumped about frogs, mosquitoes, and flies. And so I took you a little bit farther for some application here so we could see some of the other movements. So again, Pharaoh was rebellious, and God wanted to do something. He was trying to get his attention. And so as we see this, we get a little bit of a fresh perspective here, and we understand, verse number 11, Hebrews 12 and 11, that now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but it's painful. Nevertheless, afterwards it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those that have been trained by it. Therefore, and there's the application, therefore, strengthen the hands which hang down. Strengthening means to restore the ruins. What do we know about Joel? In Joel chapter 2, what does God do? He restores the years that the locust has eaten, right? And so God might chasten us and bring us down, but understand that the idea is that we're not to give up on God, that we're to continue to stay close as he works out those things where we have remained in a place of stubbornness, of rebellion, of disobedience, whatever the situation is. So he says, therefore strengthen, restore the ruins, and the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be dislocated, but rather healed. And then again, the chapter goes forward. And so the feeble knees, I will make a comment on that, because the literal Greek word behind this, it speaks about a person becoming paralyzed by a stroke. Feeble knees. And what is God doing? What is he saying at the end of this chastening thing? His aim is not to destroy us as his people, but it is to break our stubborn pride so that we can understand what he desires. He desires mercy and grace and truth. Remember, we started this study by looking at Matthew chapter 9 and the healing that was poured out by Christ over those people that were hurting and came to him. But they came to him. They didn't remain in a place of hearing truth and walking in disobedience. They came to him in full disclosure, in full brokenness. They were willing to receive. And Jesus met them right there. And I would encourage you, saints, that Christ will meet you and I right there. When we're honest before him, he will meet us right where we're at. But if we try to shuck and jive and jockey and do these things, again, well-meaning Christians get stuck in places. I understand it. Unfortunately, I've lived it too many times over the past 30 plus years or so. I've been there. I've seen the chastening hand upon my life in many ways. And all of these things that I shared with out of Leviticus 26, it feels like in one way or another, it feels like I've experienced those things walking in a place where I have been disobedient to God. And my hope and my prayer and my aim is that you would not have to go through the deep difficulty, tough, rebellious moments in your own heart. But if you do, and if you're recognizing some of these signs or symptoms or characteristics around your life, maybe you need to take a second look at your life and see where you're at, that you could draw close to God, that you could be honest with him. So what's the remedy to all of this? In closing, here it is. May we submit to the mighty hand of God and enjoy the blessings that God desires to give to those that are in relationship with him. Proverbs tells us to leave our simple ways behind and begin to live. Learn to use good judgment. Amen.
That's all for today. Join us for our next broadcast of No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Cramer, weekdays at 10:30 a.m. No Greater Love is an outreach ministry of Westminster Calvary and is supported by listeners like you. If you would like to partner with us, please text GIVE to 720-354-6485. Your donation of any amount helps keep No Greater Love on the air, ministering to thousands across the Front Range. We would like to personally invite you to join us for our weekly worship services, Sundays at 8 or 10 a.m. and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m.
We are located in Westminster, Colorado, on the northeast corner of Church Ranch and Wadsworth Parkway, near the Vasa Fitness. If you're not local, tune into the weekly live stream on our web campus app, Roku, or on Apple TV. Have you downloaded the free Westminster Calvary app yet? You can stay up to date on upcoming events, join a small group, request prayer, and watch live worship services. Just search Westminster Calvary on your favorite app store today. Lastly, we're a church that's ready to serve you. If we can do so, give us a call at 303-223-4640. And remember, there's no greater love than when Jesus gave up his life for you and me. Thanks, and God bless.